Mobility phone. Experts on Call on AM 800 is a paid program.
And welcome back to Experts on Call. Before we get to our next guest, quickly want to give a traffic report from Windsor Police. Wyandotte between Devonshire and Lincoln is closed until 2 a.m. So be on the lookout when you're out there. Remember, that is closed. Wyandotte between Devonshire and Lincoln, closed until 2 a.m. With us in the studio now, from the Sun Parlor Amateur Radio Club, Jerry Beneteau, Kyle Ciacelli, and Mike Ciacelli. This is going to be fun. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. No problem.
So let's get into it. What is amateur radio?
Okay, I'll start if I may. And I'm specifically representing the Border City Radio Club here in Windsor. As Mike said earlier, he and I work together with other groups. And the amateur radio community in Essex County, first of all, consists of probably 300 to 400 amateur enthusiasts who have taken the time and effort to pursue the hobby of amateur radio. And in a moment, Angelo, perhaps we can talk a little bit about what amateur radio is all about. But suffice to say that there is a licensing requirement, there is a course of instruction, followed by an Industry Canada exam, which leads to that amateur radio license. Amateur radio is a hobby known sometimes as ham radio. There are many sub-hobbies involved. I would suggest that the main thing we do as amateurs is, first of all, talk. We talk and listen both locally and around the world. When I say locally, using our radio equipment, which can be a home station, can be a mobile station in our car, or a portable radio that we would carry on our belt, very similar to a fire or policeman. Those radios allow us to provide communications and talk with other amateur radio enthusiasts on frequencies that are assigned to us by Industry Canada. And when I say local communication, I suggest I'm talking between Windsor, Leamington, and the Chatham area.
Okay.
We also have a wide range of frequencies that we use to talk worldwide, to talk to amateur radio enthusiasts all over the world. What do we talk about? We talk about many things. A lot of it is of a technical nature, our radio equipment, our setup of our stations, and in particular antennas. And many different types of antennas that we are always trying to experiment and do better to make the antenna work better, to extend, if you will, the range of our communication. But that's only one facet of it. I'm teaching a course right now in amateur radio, and we talked just last Wednesday night about some of the other things that we can do. For example, a lot of people, I have a student in my class right now who loves to build his own radio receiver. And when he's licensed shortly, he'll be allowed to build his own transmitter. So he's interested in this day and age of building electronic circuits and getting things to work, much like our forefathers and people interested in ham radio 60 and 80 years ago did. We have people interested in contesting, and there are all kinds of amateur radio contests. For example, there's a contest which takes a lifetime to work an amateur in every country in the world, approximately 328 countries. And it's a thrill for those people interested in that particular project. As I say, it takes many years to try and work the very last few countries in the world. And when you look at North Korea, where amateur radio is generally not allowed, it takes some time and effort. Other hams are interested in working through our satellites. We have amateurs around the world have approximately 12 to 14 satellites where we can communicate with each other using our own amateur satellites. Not commercial satellites, but our own amateur satellites. So those are a few of the activities that we can do. And I would also like to say that a lot of people who are presently amateur radio operators started by just listening, as I did when I was just a little kid. Listening to the radio, the shortwave radio that my dad brought home, and I started listening to the boats on the river and the Ohio State Police, just above where CBC was until last night on 1550. In those days, we listened to the ships on the river, long before we had what we call VHF communication that they have today. So those are some of the things that we can do.
It's fascinating stuff, and I'm sure people that are listening are going to be really interested in what you guys are saying. So if you guys have a question, give us a call at the radio station, 519-792-CKLW, 519-792-2559. So how does one become involved with amateur radio? How do you become a ham?
Well, once again, I would say the best way is to join a local radio club, the Sun Parlor Radio Club in Leamington, and in Windsor, the Border City Radio Club, and I'm sure both those clubs can be found by Googling the words. Somebody who's interested in joining a club are going to associate themselves with people who will help steer them in the direction of obtaining their license. And when we have enough people interested, we conduct courses from time to time. In over a roughly 10 to 12-week period, we arrange to cover the material necessary for you to sit down and write a 100-question exam. And depending on your pass mark, you will achieve your radio license authorization from Industry Canada.
All right. Mike, how did you become involved with amateur radio, and what was the interest for you?
Well, I think I've been involved for about 20 years now. But as Jerry said, when I was younger, I used to listen. I had a scanner when I was a kid. When I was 10, 11 years old, I had a scanner. A citizen band radio was important in my life back in the 70s, and I think that's where it started. And then I just wanted to progress a little bit more. In fact, my brother and myself got together in 1990 and said, listen, we need to go to that next step. And amateur radio was that next step for us. Again, I went to the Sun Parlor Amateur Radio Club then. They've been in existence for 40 years now, so they were available to us, took the course through the club, and then in turn got licensed. And again, now I'm involved in the local club itself.
And now your son Kyle is involved. What's that like to become part of the amateur radio club?
It's a little different because, I don't know, the people that I normally hang out with, they don't know much about amateur radio. They don't really pay attention to it. It's all about their phones and who they're texting and stuff like that. Amateur radio isn't really, it's not as important to the teenage community as the other two beside me here. It is nice though, because whenever you're talking to someone new out there, it's always about, well, you sound really young. How old are you? And they're like, oh, I'm only 17. They always sound really surprised because you don't really see that many younger people doing amateur radio.
For sure, but that's got to be one of the great things about this is there's people that you're communicating with and interacting with that have the same interests that you do, correct?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Sure. And just today, just on our way up here today, Kyle and I were on our way up here. We talked to a gentleman from Anchorage, Alaska, in our truck on the way up here, but he was using what was called Echolink. And Echolink is a form of using the internet tied into amateur radio, and you can talk all over the world. So where we thought maybe 10, 15 years ago with the internet, it was maybe going to kill amateur radio, it's actually enhanced what we can do now. And in that case, talking to that gentleman, it was interesting. He was 4 hours behind us, gave us a call here, and he was crystal clear because he was using the internet on his end, and we were using the radio on our end. So it's fascinating to see that the internet's actually advanced what we're doing in amateur radio right now.
And the other thing, if I could add to that, Angelo, for me, I've been an amateur for over 40 years. One of the things that's been of interest to me is how the computer era has benefited us in amateur radio because, for example, the other night I was reading a particular technical group that I belong to on used radio equipment, and he was looking for a particular part that he was having difficulty getting, and it just happens I had 2 or 3 of the exact part that he needs. So either from a technical information, schematic information on how to get something working, the internet has been, for me, in amateur radio, a wonderful, wonderful marriage.
So when you're on the radio, are you talking just to one person, or can you talk to a wide range of people at the same time?
Both.
Yes, we can talk to multiple groups of people. We're using repeaters, that kind of infrastructure that's the same as like a police or a fire department we use.
Okay.
And in turn, I could be talking to Jerry from LaSalle, I could be in Leamington, and we could be talking, 25 miles across the county using the systems that we have in place here. So yeah, and in fact, we practice, we have nets, and we normally have them on a weekly basis. And what happens is the purpose of those nets is to test and make sure that our equipment works properly, and to make sure that we have the ability to, if we ever needed to use that equipment during emergencies, that it would be working for us. So we do that on a weekly basis, and we do it provincially wide as well.
One of the things that amateur radio kind of stands in the forefront, Angelo, is while we all appreciate our cell phones and Facebook and the computer issues, Blackberries and those things, they are essentially complicated infrastructures, and they depend on a lot of things happening in the right order for your communications to go through. And for the most part, it's very dependable. But as we've seen from time to time in disasters, and after September 11th, when the cell phone circuits get overcrowded and go down, amateur radio will always come through. That is to say, if we have a simple radio, a battery supply, and an antenna, we are good for what we call point-to-point communication. So particularly in a lot of the disasters that we've seen around the U.S. and Canada in the last couple of years, amateur radio plays a big part in helping the authorities by providing backup communications at hospitals and so on, in schools, relief centers, and that type of thing.
All right, we do have a caller on the line, so let's go to the phone lines where we have Greg waiting. Hi, Greg.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good.
Good, what's your question?
Yeah, I was wondering, is it possible to establish a remote station on a mountaintop that's solar-powered or wind-powered and be able to control it remotely?
I can answer that, yes. In fact, I have responsibilities with Radio Amateurs of Canada for some insurance efforts that they require some experience that I've had in my background. And one of the groups that I work with in the Yukon, most of their sites are at remote mountaintop sites. The problem is servicing those sites during most of the year. Therefore, the cost and to set up a mountaintop site is far more expensive for those situations than for the sites in the urban areas of Canada where we can get to them when service is required on the equipment.
Oh, very good. So in other words, it is definitely possible to do that. So, but that would definitely extend VHF and UHF range then for that whole area because of that, right?
That's right. The purpose of a mountaintop repeater is that we take a signal from a mobile or portable radio and it's retransmitted from, let's say, the top of an apartment building or a TV tower at 500 or 600 feet, and therefore the range of that signal will be several times longer than a simple antenna on top of a car or maybe 30 feet on top of a house.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for the call, Greg.
Okay.
Have a good weekend.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so a lot of people interested in this, and it's a very cool concept. When we come back, we're going to go right back to the phone lines. With us right now, we have Jerry Beneteau, Mike Ciacelli, and his son Kyle talking about Amateur Radio Club. This is Experts on Call on AM 800.
Whether it's multi-vehicle comparisons or detailed road tests, you'll find it on Motor News Weekly, Saturday nights at 8 and Sunday nights at 7 on AM 800.
Without duct tape?
Red, try and hold it together.
Hold it together with what?
Comedian Red Green trusts most of his work to duct tape. Now AM 800 wants to see what you can create using the handyman's secret weapon. Build something creatively solely out of duct tape, then email a picture of your creation to contests at am800cklw.com. We'll select 5 winners who will each get a pair of tickets to see Red Green as he brings his Wit and Wisdom Tour to Migration Hall in Kingsville. Start building, and remember, spare the duct tape, spoil the job.
There's a lot of misinformation about Samsung's clean energy investment in Ontario, so we thought we'd give you the facts. Samsung C&T and its partners are investing $7 billion to create a green energy industry in Ontario, creating 16,000 clean energy jobs, helping to build the largest cluster of wind and solar power anywhere in the world, right here in Ontario. For the real story, go to cleanjobstoday.ca.
We want you to stay on top of what's going on in your community. Sign up for AM 800's breaking news alerts at am800cklw.com and you'll receive an alert direct to your email. It's not online research, it's on-air research.
I'm on air. This is the best place to do that.
Experts on Call on AM 800, 519-792-2559 and pound 800 on your Bell mobility phone. Experts on Call is a paid program on AM 800.
.47 p.m. here on hour 5 of Experts on Call. With us, Jerry Beneteau, Mike Ciacelli, and Kyle Ciacelli. Mike and Kyle from the Sun Parlor Amateur Radio Club. Jerry Beneteau from Border City Radio Amateur Radio Club. Talking amateur radio, very cool concept. We do have a caller on the line, so let's go to John. Hi, John.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I got actually two things I want to say. One question, and just want to say something. I don't know if the community knows this or not, but you got a couple of guys there in the studio right now who are pioneers. Mike Ciacelli and Jerry Beneteau, guys like himself, Bill Leal, Bill Leffler, or Willis Lonsbury guys and Randy Mawson from Environment Canada, who started a program called CanWarn. And this program is across the country today. Hopefully they can explain a little bit more about it, and I'd like to know where it stands today.
Oh, that's great. Great question. Yes, we were very proud that approximately 21, 22 years ago in Windsor started a program in conjunction with Environment Canada to provide weather spotting for severe weather that we tend to get in Ontario, and particularly in Essex County. And so what we did is establish a radio network at Environment Canada's office at that time, where we would actually have people in the field, in their cars, in their homes, on their portable radios, watching for severe weather. And the point is that we were trained by Environment Canada to spot weather. And that network and that enthusiasm still goes 22 years later, where we have, and it is, as the caller said, it has expanded all across Canada. And amateur radio has been responsible for reporting and to give a little more lead time to the weather desk in either Toronto or elsewhere in Canada to get the warnings out that there in fact has been a tornado sighted. So amateur radio quietly plays that part of helping our fellow citizens every year. And with the lightning and the storms that we get in Essex County, I've been a CanWarn controller for now 22 years. And we have busy nets in those afternoons when the weather turns very black.
And just to expand on that, this year, Environment Canada normally does a rotation where we'll go from Windsor to Leamington to Chatham. Fortunately, this year it was offered in Leamington as the rotation, but at the same time we offered it up to the general public. We had almost 155 people in Leamington at our event this year, and normally we'd probably get, I would say, maybe 30 to 60 individuals that would come out, mostly amateur radio operators. So this year it was interesting that the public, they took an interest in radio, especially after the events of June 10th in Leamington with the tornado that happened. Everyone was aware of weather. They want to be more aware of what's going on nowadays, and they want to get that information. They always want to get more information. So it was a really good turnout. CanWarn's alive and well, and like I say, it's a really good asset to have here. And again, it was started right here in Windsor.
And John, thanks for the call. If anybody else has any questions, give us a call. They're going to be here for about another 10 minutes. 519-792-CKLW, 519-792-2559. When you get a call like that from John and you find out just how much you've actually helped people through the radio club, what does that mean to you guys?
Well, it's really community service because we're all volunteers. When we go out and spot weather, it's our own radio equipment at our own cost. There's no remuneration. In fact, amateur radio has a requirement that it's a hobby and there's no remuneration involved. So it's not a business. You can't use the amateur radio frequencies as an example for business. You can't use it for delivery type service and so on. It's strictly hobby oriented. And maybe we should take it into the next step about the privileges that we in fact get with an amateur radio license before our time runs out, Angelo. And I would just say this, that a lot of us got our start with CB radio, whereby in that particular radio service there are 40 channels available to you to use in your car or home to keep in touch with your friends via the CB radio band. In amateur radio, we have literally thousands of frequencies available to us as a result of the efforts of taking the course and eventually passing that Industry Canada exam. And by using these different frequencies, and it is depending on the time of day and what we call radio propagation and other factors will depend on what frequency we choose to call around the world. Our local VHF frequencies that we use to talk around the county in Kent County, those are, of course, available to us 24/7. So it's interesting to note that the privileges that go with having a ham radio license allow a lot of flexibility in pursuing the hobby.
You guys have been here for maybe 15 minutes, 10 minutes. We've already had a couple callers, so I'm sure people that are listening, they're very interested in what this is all about. What's some contact information we can give some of the listeners?
Well, I can start off as far as anyone in the Leamington area. The Sun Parlor Amateur Radio Club has their own website, thespark.ca. It's the SPARC.ca. We also have a club room at the Frank T. Shirk Complex or the Kingsman Recreation Complex. That's at 249 Shirk in Leamington. The phone number there is 519-322-2337, extension 224, and that'll go right to our voicemail in the club room. And they can leave a message in regards to any questions or if they're interested in taking a course. Again, just leave us a detailed message and a phone number. We'll get back to you, and maybe we can get you involved in the hobby.
And for the people in the Windsor area and this part of the county, in a similar fashion, if they would simply Google Border City Radio Club, that will give them the information, contact information for the club. And we have a very good website with an outline of what we do, amateur radio items for sale, and questions back and forth. And there's a place to leave a message, and certainly we'll get back to you for somebody who's interested in learning more about getting their amateur radio license. I might also, Angelo, add that in the last couple of years we were fortunate enough to make an arrangement with the Ontario South Science Centre on Marion Avenue, which is in the Erie Parent Avenue, and I believe they're open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we have a fully equipped amateur radio station in that facility at 930 Marion Avenue. And usually on the weekends there's somebody there in the ham radio room that would be very pleased to show them what amateur radio is all about.
All right, good stuff. Let's go back to the phone lines where we have Luke waiting. Hi, Luke. Luke, you there? All right, we'll try to get Luke back hopefully in a couple minutes. Back to the Amateur Radio Club, though, guys. You said in the last segment, Jerry, that you thought the internet might be bad for amateur radio. In fact, it's turned out to be a positive.
Yes.
Is amateur radio maybe at this point stronger than ever with in terms of how many people use it around the world?
No, I'm going to say it this way. When amateur radio up until a few years ago was the only game in town, now we have competition, as Kyle said a few moments ago, with the various BlackBerry networks, Facebook, Twitter, and all of those systems. They probably, and especially for young people, take away the interest perhaps in getting an amateur radio license. And the main reason for that is the small portable devices that we all carry make it pretty easy to stay in touch with each other. For somebody who's interested in spending a little more time listening, building, experimenting, those are things that are going to be done at home in either a workshop or desk environment, and would naturally lead perhaps to one being more interested in getting an amateur radio license. I said earlier, the BlackBerry devices of the world, very complicated infrastructure, they're wonderful products. However, amateur radio is somewhat simple and easy to construct, easy to establish, and when communications gets tough and other infrastructures start to break down, amateur radio can be depended on.
You guys don't have an hourglass on those radios like the BlackBerry when it freezes,
no.
do you? Oh,
no,
I hate it when
fortunately.
Kyle, you know, we're talking about the younger generation like yourself that's getting involved, and you said not many people that you interact with maybe know about it, but when you tell them a little bit about it, do you find that it does garner a little bit of interest from them?
It's a neat concept for me, I know, because almost everyone has a smartphone or one of these iPhones, Android phones or something, and there's a free app on here called Echolink, and Echolink is pretty much using either your cell service or a Wi-Fi network to connect with amateur radio. So if you don't want to carry a radio around with you, or you don't have one with you at the time, you just hop on your phone, go on your app, and you can pretty much be an amateur radio operator from your cell phone.
Good stuff.
And we've incorporated here in Essex and Windsor, all of our infrastructure that we have is connected to the internet. So we have the capability of Echolink and IRLP incorporated onto our systems to make sure individuals like Kyle or anybody else can jump onto their cell phones and get on there. And that's been great for us for traveling. When we travel, we want to communicate back to our communities. We've got the ability to do that now.
All right, good stuff. Guys, thank you so much for being with us. We're a very quick segment, but I really do appreciate you guys coming in. A lot of information. With us this half hour was Jerry Beneteau from the Border City Radio Amateur Club and Mike Ciacelli and his son Kyle from the Sun Parlor Amateur Club out in Leamington. The SPARC.ca.
The Spark.ca.
The Spark.ca. And then also for Border City, Google it, and it'll come up for link for more information. When we come back, we're going to wrap things up here on Experts on Call on AM 800.
That brings our Experts on Call show